Guys, before we get started, let me tell you about Spotify for Podcasters. It is a great app that I use to actually put together my podcast episodes. I record them there and get them edited and trimmed and such. And then from there, I can actually put them on any podcasting platform that I may want to. So if podcasting is something that you feel you might be interested in, check out Spotify for Podcasters. Now, let's get on with the program. Welcome. And let's read our verses. I'm going to read Matthew 25:14 through 30 to start things off. And I'm not even going to read the full section. I'm just going to read a couple at the beginning, and then I'm going to read a chunk at the end as well. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So he also who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent and went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. All right, we're going to jump down to the end, and I'm going to start off where the man with 1 talent is responding to the master. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then our next verse is 2 Timothy 4:2. Preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching. Now we're going to go to 1 Kings 19:18. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. All verses on this podcast will be read from the ESV version, unless said otherwise. And most episodes will begin with the verses at the beginning, much like this one did, because I do a lot of my recording while driving. With that being said, let's get into our lesson. All right, now that we've read the verses, let's dive into our lesson. So, let's go ahead and start off with the talents, with the parable of the talents. So, I work a lot. I work about 10 hours a day, average, with my main job. And I got to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I usually have my alarm set for 2:40. And I get up at 2:40, try to get out the door before 3 or a little after 3. Most mornings, it's about a half hour average. And then my drive to work is an hour. So an hour back and forth, that's 2 hours plus the 30 minutes. So that's 12 hours and 30 minutes a day that I've already taken up. And then a lot of evenings I end up doing some side jobs to make a little extra money because we are a single income home. We do it that way so my wife can homeschool, and we just, that's what works for us. And so that's why we do it that way. And whenever you add all that up, that's like 16 hours, 17 hours. And that's a lot of time away from home, and not a lot of time to do things that are meaningful to me that I feel I need to do. So I'm a writer. I try to write as much as possible. And obviously being a family man, having a wife and a kid, I don't really get to spend a lot of time with them. And so prioritizing everything, it makes it very difficult. And I have tried to record podcasts in the past, and I recently hit a moment where I had a breakdown discussing things with my wife, not like a huge like mental breakdown or anything like that. It was more of like, well, you know what? I'm just done. I'm not going to do anything else anymore. I'm just going to focus on working. I'm going to work, and I'm going to come home, and I'm going to spend time with you guys. And that's kind of the way I looked at things, but I didn't go any further with what I should have. And so I essentially buried a lot of my talents in the ground, because I have written a biblical study, like I called it a devotional, on depression, and I can use my talent of writing for lots of things. I don't necessarily mind talking, depending on how the situation is, I should say. So I was just going to not do all that. I wasn't going to record podcasts at all. I wasn't going to write. I wasn't going to do anything. And I just was stuck in this loop, much like I feel like I've stuck myself in a loop right now. But I got to a point where I felt like I couldn't keep it down. Like I needed to write. I needed to do something. Well, what should I do now? Crossed my mind. And even today, this is actually take 2 of this podcast, and like of this episode specifically. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not even gonna lie. I don't know what I'm doing whenever it comes to trying to get this podcast out. I am learning, flying by the seat of my pants. I deleted this entire episode while I was trying to get episode 2 up, and I felt like this lesson was so good and so important that I needed to do it again. And here we are doing it again. And I hit that moment of today where I was just like, what should I do now? What should I do now? Like, it was an absolute panic. It was upsetness. Little itty bitty part of me, more of not wanting to, but a little bit of me wanted to just be like, you know what? It's not meant to be then, and just give up. But I was like, man, that first episode was so good, and you recorded a banger of a second episode. So what should you do now? I called my wife, and I was like, hey, this just happened. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I don't know what to do. I feel like I need to record the first episode again and try to just hammer out 2 episodes, just edit and post and yada, yada, yada. And she agreed. So now I'm going to be on this crazy, crazy trip of trying to edit and post 2 episodes as quickly as I possibly can, because I wanted to have the second episode up by Thursday. It's Tuesday evening, and I'm headed to my second job. So, yay me. All right. I hit that moment of what should I do now? How many other people, you had to have hit that what should I do now at some point, right? And that's kind of the thing is like, oh, what should we do? There's a lot going on right now, and it's easy to get down and get hard on yourself. But if we look at the different verses that I had discussed at the opening, think of Elijah and everything that Elijah went through. That dude was on the high of highs, totally owning the prophets of Baal. And then he's on the lowest of lows and just gets destroyed, gets owned, and falls into a depression, and, hits a moment where he's just an absolute wreck. And what does God say to him? Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. 7,000 are with him. The dude wasn't alone. He thought he was, but he wasn't alone. We're not alone in feeling like, what should I do now? Well, we need to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off whenever we get down like that, and continue on. And, you know, I asked myself, whenever I went to start doing this podcast, what should I do now? And, you know, 2 Timothy 4:2, preach the word in season and out of season. I felt like this is what I needed to do. This is definitely not how I anticipated the first episode to go at all. But here we are, and I think it makes the lesson that much stronger that I've lost everything and I had to record it again for a second time. And life can be that way. You know, how many times have people had to start over? I'm not the first one. Think about Job. And Job's was way more extreme than mine. Mine was just a podcast. It's part of life. You know, sometimes you got to restart over and pick yourself up. And man, what a lesson in Job with, you know, the guy had everything and was probably like the best known guy in the area at that time. You know, because of everything he had, he would have been extremely rich. He would have been considered very, very rich. And they lost everything, him and his wife. And his wife even at one point said, curse God and die. And for that side note, which this is going to have to be a lesson, maybe a lesson 5 or even further down the road, but a lesson about amazing spouses. Because, you know, my wife, she was not like, well, just give up. She said, click that record button again, so to speak. I'm summarizing. So that's what I did. I picked myself up, and I feel like I'm really repeating myself an awful lot more than I want to, by all means. Man, losing all that stuff that I had, I felt like I had such a great lesson in the first one, and I didn't want to lose it, and I feel like that's even repeating myself. But you can pick yourself up and continue on and keep going, and it'll all be all right. We've learned that from Job, and we've learned that from Elijah. We have these biblical examples, and that's what I want to do. I want to be able to move forward and continue on, and to do, I don't know if I'm necessarily good at it, but I feel linked to it in a way, where I'm going to try my best. And, you know, technology, obviously me and technology don't get along, but I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to persevere, because I want to be able to use my talents for the Lord. I want to be able to go forward and do the Lord's work as best as I can. Am I going to be amazing at it? I don't know. I might be more like the guy with 2 talents. I used to say that I am a man of 1 talent. So I can pick up trash. I'm a good worker. I don't know. I think I've got more than that 1 talent. But I am a trash man. And how many times at work do you have those bad days where, I'm going to use myself for an example because it's the best example I know. How many times at work have you had a really bad moment where it's like just absolutely awful? There was one time in particular at work where the tailgate blew open on one of my trash trucks that I was driving. And that is a rough day. That is really rough, because you got to pick up the trash that fell on the ground. You got to wait for the mechanic to get there to help put a diaper on the truck to where you can take it and dump it. And then, you know, you're so far behind, and it really begins to add up, and it does not make for an easy day. It does not make for a fun day. And that's just one of 1,000,001 struggles that I've had at work. And everybody has 1,000,001 instances where things went wrong. And you had to ask yourself, what should I do now? Did you stop and pray after that happened? Be honest with you, I probably should have stopped and prayed before I hit record for trying to do this a second time. But I was ready and eager to dive back into this. But whenever I hit stop, I am going to take a second and pray. Because he's the one that I'm here to give recognition to. He's the one that is my focus with this podcast. My focus is always in everything I do, even though I fail miserably, I feel at times, to please him. And I want to do my best to provide content for Christians who are trying to get away from secular stuff, so to speak. I want good, clean content for people who are looking for good, clean content. And this is just one of those steps. I've got a plan for 2 other podcasts that I want to do. And this one it's for men, but it doesn't necessarily specifically pertain only to men. There's something here for everybody, whether you're a man with a blue-collar job, whether you're a Christian man, whether you're a Christian woman. I hope maybe you can get something from it. Maybe refer it to your husband if you are a woman listening to this podcast. But I want to add in like outdoorsy stuff, like talking about different hunting things and everything like that. I've actually got a really cool idea for an episode, but it's going to be one that I'm going to have to do a little bit later down the road. But we're going to try to do some awesome things. I've got some plans in mind, and I'm so thankful you're here. This episode turned out way differently the second time, but I think I'm going to end it here. This is a raw cut. Unedited. I'm going to put it in there just like this. And thank you guys so much for being with me. And I hope you turn into episode 2, because it'll probably be a little bit better planned out than this one. I really appreciate you guys so much. As you go about your day, think about what you should do now. Have that inner reflection to bring it all together and to bring that focus back to God. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to catch you on the next one.